welcome to everybody here and everybody viewing this recording. My name is Francesca Rebar. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm coming to you from Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. I work at Exigy as our business operations manager, and I'm so excited to moderate this panel discussion. At Exigy, we've been holding space internally to discuss intersectionality and the challenges of doing meaningful work with technology. And I am so excited that we've opened up this panel discussion to the public. Today's panel is on continuing to do good in civic tech during challenging times. I'm thrilled to share the floor with some incredible workers today. We have 5 panelists. I'll let you kind of like wave as I go through your names. I have my coworker at Exigy, Izzy Hershey Reyes, joining me as a senior product manager. We have 2 co-forma employees, Jared Kuna as their senior director of creative technology, and Jess Jones, a director of UX design. We also have Devin Olmack, an impact measurement expert with 60 decibels. And last but not least, Liz Tupper, Senior Director of Product at Civic Actions. While we all come from these impactful companies and organizations, I want to clarify that the opinions expressed here today are their own and do not reflect the views of our employers. You'll be hearing a lot from them all today. I encourage you to take some notes. I have pen and paper. And feel free to ask any of your own questions in the chat, and I'll try to integrate those with our discussion. This topic is timely, it's sensitive, and it's robust. There is a lot to cover. So before I hand it off to our panelists, I just want to take some time to recognize the heaviness of this moment in civic tech. Some of us have been personally affected, grieving the loss of roles, coworkers, departments, or policies that we've dedicated much of our time and passion towards. Almost everyone has been at least indirectly affected. Any and all feelings you're currently carrying in this space are valid. Our intention for the next hour is to help remind you all of the community that's still here, while also having honest dialogue, sharing wisdom, and hopefully finding some hope. So I asked you all earlier in the chat to drop what motivates you to work in civic tech. Civic tech can mean many different things in different moments. So for my panelists, right now, given the broader climate, what does doing good in civic tech look like or feel like to you personally? Jared, do you want to kick us off?
Yeah, sure. And hi, everybody. Thank you for joining today. I'm really excited about this panel, and I just really can't wait to have this conversation. What does doing good in civic tech look like still with everything? For me, I think just doing good is we're going to need to deepen our commitment to users, to accessibility, doing everything that we can to make the world a better place, being human-centered, being inclusive. It's just all those things I think that drove us here in the first place. But I think that what that's also going to require is being able to stand up for all of those things much more visibly and vocally, especially just being in a world that's trying to tell us that we shouldn't.
Thanks, Jared. Devin, do you want to chime in with what doing good in civic tech looks like or feels like for you right now?
Yeah, it is actually very similar and maybe just a little bit drilled down to what Jared was discussing. What keeps me motivated and centered is human stories and sharing and hearing stories of I say human stories, a lot of people use case studies, but sharing these stories of how products and services and civic tech and really just anything in the social impact space that's really trying to do good and how that affects people's lives and the good that that brings to people's lives. And so I really am trying to, when the macro environment feels overwhelming and a little bit heavy, to really focus on individual stories.
I think that's such a great framing. Liz, do you want to chime in too?
Yeah, I like love to just echo stuff. I think, understanding the good that has been done, right? Like there's plenty of good that got us here, and we can't take away the work that we already have built, right? Like we can't take away the impact that that had in those moments, right? Like that happened and that made a positive impact, and then we've learned a lot. And what I've been really trying to do in these moments with change, some change that we know how to handle, some change that we're learning how to handle in the moment, is how we can sort of really slow down and meet people with this change in a really sort of empathetic way, working with what we have, stretching our ability to explore opportunities for how we can work with things, and really sort of showing up for people in the way that we best can. The more empathy, even more empathy than before, right? Like, and just, having really honest conversations around values, right? Like, I'm not changing my values just because the world is going to change around me, right? Those values are still going to ring true. And I want to know with my team and with my clients what their goals are, what their values are, where their lines are that shouldn't be crossed, and how we can navigate that stuff together. But I think it's really important to have continued open dialogue at this time so we can support one another.
That's great, Liz. Thank you. Definitely open dialogue, I think, is what brings us all here today. Um, Kind of going off of that question, and Izzy, feel free to add on to it as well. What strategies have you all been using to keep products impactful, especially during a time like now where folks are facing budget cuts and shifting policies?
Yeah, it's such a tough spot to be in. And I think there's a really disempowering and disheartening mindset that I find myself coming into as a vendor, where I think, oh, I am at the whim of my contract, or I'm at the whim of this entity that has this government agency that has contracted me, and all of the political powers that be and that shift. But what I have found to be both useful and also a more empowering approach is to realize that changing budget priorities and political priorities have always been something that we've contended with. And adaptability and flexibility and the ability to pivot how we talk about our work and how we pitch our value proposition have been things that we as a sector have been doing for a long time. Is it different now? Is it much more unstable now? Is it much harder to grapple with right now? Absolutely, 100%. I don't say that to diminish the current state of affairs at all. But there are skills that we have that we can improve upon, like Liz was saying, that we can draw on and then use in order to deploy strategically in this time. I think creativity is a really top one that I've been thinking about, specifically about how do we creatively pitch what we're doing? How do we bring different or maybe unexpected partners into the conversation outside of the traditional models that we use? Philanthropy has been a really common place that we can look into as a potential new partner to some of our more traditionally government funded work. And then also helping be good partners to our clients and helping them talk about the value and the impact of the work we're doing, so that they can advocate in the rooms that we are not invited in yet. Giving them the language, helping craft the message, helping them understand and really buy in at a level where maybe they didn't need to before.
Jess, I know we haven't heard from you yet. Do you have anything to add around that, or share more about what doing good looks like at this moment for you, especially in the design space?
Yeah, thanks, everyone. Great to be here. I think for the last 10 years, I've become a very much better student of history. And I think one of the things that draws me to human-centered design is that it does feel like a movement sometimes. It feels like, when you're advocating for people, particularly the most vulnerable, which a lot of us do in civic tech work, um, you start to feel like there is a movement behind this. And one thing I've learned from examining history, and many of you know this as well, is that movements never really die, right? They evolve, they go underground maybe for a little bit, but they don't go away completely. And I think that's something, it can feel very much like what is civic tech going to be during and after all of this, right? During and after all of the change that we're seeing. And I do want to acknowledge that it is extreme change. Like we do experience change all the time in our jobs, but this is pretty extreme. Um, so I think when I'm thinking about how to stay impactful, when I'm thinking about what it means to be in civic tech, I'm thinking about how do I keep the fire burning? How do I keep the hope alive, not trying to be toxically positive here, but keeping things going because not only does it lend itself to a lot of what everyone else has said, right? Like here's ways we need to lean on the skills we have, learn new skills, learn new messaging, things like that. But also because at some point we're going to have to rebuild, right? There's things we're going to have to rebuild. There's things we're going to have to completely change and pivot on. And so I feel like that's something that's giving me some energy in this time, where it can be really hard to find that energy.
I love the forward-looking facets to keep you going, and definitely love the reminder that, yeah, these movements never do die. Devin, do you have any other insights on different strategies you've been using to keep projects impactful?
Yeah, there's a couple that come to mind, and a lot of my work, I would say about 50% of my work is US focused, but then 50% of my work is international focused. And something that I have found really powerful is engaging with civic tech organizations in countries all over the world, like India and Kenya, and learning. I mean, they're not their environments that they operate in are unfortunately not dissimilar to many of the things that we're going through in the US right now. And so leaning on some of those organizations to learn from, they, have been through the fire and the turmoil that we are currently experiencing in a lot of our organizations. And leaning on them for best practices, for strategies of people who have been through it, and kind of looking beyond our borders for strategies that we can use and apply here. And these are some organizations, like one that comes to mind is eGov, and they work in places like India and Sri Lanka and Ethiopia. And so I'd be happy if anyone's interested to, facilitate introductions there as just strategy and partnership building. I think partnership building is something that I'm relying on heavily in terms of when it's within an organization, it can sometimes feel very insular. And so going beyond that to other organizations to learn from other professionals around what they're doing. And I think there is a bigger voice when more people come to the table and a more powerful voice. And so how can, the impact of 5 organizations be told differently than just one organization? Jess, you kind of talked about this in terms of the human-centered nature, and Jared a little bit too, of like keeping the human at the center. And I think what I focus a lot on in my career is how data tell us a story. And a lot of us have a wealth of data and a wealth of Excel spreadsheets or systems that hold a lot of data. We've been using that data to tell a certain story. Are there different stories that we can be saying about our data that will reach different audiences, kind of to what Izzy was also mentioning in terms of like turning towards philanthropy? Not the same message will resonate with philanthropists or nonprofits that used to resonate with other, government organizations. And so how do we turn some of that impact data into a more targeted message for that type of audience? Those are just a few that come to mind.
Thanks, Devin. I hear like a lot of storytelling coming out of your answers, and definitely from you and Izzy, like thinking more creatively and how and who we're partnering with to kind of get through these times. Shifting gears a little bit, I'd love to hear from some folks. Maybe I'll tag Jared in first. How are you balancing ethical design and engineering with constraints like restrictive government agendas right now?
Yeah. So at least on the contracts that we've been working on, they've existed for a bit. So we haven't seen any restrictive changes coming our way, but what I'm starting to see is shifting language around accessibility right now. Sometimes accessibility might be taken out altogether, or that we're shifting from using the words accessibility to Section 508. And I think that's something that is kind of beginning to like inch us back towards having some form of minimum compliance. When we think about accessibility, we know that like compliance doesn't necessarily mean that something is going to be fully accessible or accessible and usable. So what we're trying to do is build up our skills as an organization to just do accessibility better. That means like getting everybody to learn how to use assistive technology, how to use keyboard navigation, how to use screen readers or voice control. I think that's the only way that we could really start to like shift left on accessibility. So shifting left is just going to mean really thinking about the needs of users who rely on assistive technology to the earliest phases of design. So I think it's also just yeah, so we just need to be able to do that as a form of muscle memory, that we're just building accessible experiences from the beginning. So it's not something that we're doing later on. It's just built in the process, and we can do that like even in a way that's somewhat a little bit more quietly than we used to do it. We also talk about accessibility in terms of like curb cuts, like accessibility helps everybody. We end up building a lot of like what I would say probably enterprise software or government facing software where we can add keyboard navigation for accessibility, but that keyboard navigation helps every single user be able to work more efficiently because they're not using the mouse to move between smaller form fields. So it makes the work process a lot more efficient for everybody. Even semantic HTML makes the developer experience a lot easier for the engineers on the team because you could actually look at the HTML element and know exactly what it is. So if you ever work on a code base that just does not have a lot of good documentation or it's not written very clearly, all those little things in the aggregate make things really difficult to work on. Yeah.
I think those were some great insights. Lots of people are resonating in the chat, and I'm hearing a lot of, taking time to upskill your team and kind of keep doing the work on the back end. Jess, did you have anything else to add on that?
Yeah, I think to echo Jared's point, one thing that we can do is stick to our processes. So there's a reason we do things the way we do them. And we've proven out many times over that the way staying human-centered, understanding needs from the beginning, focusing on the problem and not the solution first, all those things make everything better. Not only does it make it better for the humans, but how many ROI and UX webinars have you sat through, right? Like, there's so many ways you can talk about this, where you're talking about efficiency, like marrying the words back to leadership, if that is what is important to them. And I think, accessibility is a great example. It is so much more expensive and so much more effort to go back and fix something, remediate something, right, than it is to just bake it into your process. And if you can, like Izzy said, changing your messaging is really going to matter here. When you're talking about user research, like, why are we doing user research? Yes, we need to know the needs, but also because let's execute on this thing correctly the first time. And then, we don't have to go back and redo the work. I think that, I'm not a huge fan of the ROI argument for UX. I think that that really diminishes it, and there's so much more to technology than ROI. But it is a way that you can meet somebody where they're at.
Definitely. Whereas from like a product lead side, and someone maybe interacting with clients a lot, do you have anything to add on how you balance, remaining ethical and true to your values?
Yeah, I think, really figuring out the core of the goal, right? Because for example, there's ways that we've had to weave in more efficiency, right? And then we can bring forward stuff like, hey, we wanted to make our process more lean, right? Like, I'm actually excited about some of the like leaner startup product thinking that we can bring right now, instead of what I've historically seen in government work, which I would call a little bit more agile fall, right? Like, we can push forward some of this dialogue that we've been having for years to be like, hey, actually, let's clean up our sprint process a little bit more. Let's push forward some of these automation ideas that we've talked about around automating reporting or whatever it is. Like, we're bringing forward conversation. So like, from the ethical piece, we try to still lead from our values, and our values as a company are openness, balance, and care. And so like, I don't want my client to burn out. I don't want my employees to burn out. I want there to be care for my employees, our clients, the people that we're serving. And then, this transparency. I want us to like put everything on the table. If we can't do something, okay, we can't do something, but let's at least talk about it, right? And then we'll work together to find a solution. But a lot of times right now, we're actually bringing forward old ideas that had to be tabled because it wasn't the right time or we weren't ready. So we've got a lot of stuff that we're bringing back from before, that we're able to push forward, and really sort of be a partner for our clients to navigate doing things in a new way in government that might not be a new way for the rest of the way that tech's been operating, and sort of helping them navigate that, or find sort of an in between that works for everyone.
That's such a great addition, Liz. I think, yeah, it's definitely great for us as employees at, companies that are staying true to their values to just double down and do some of that work, but how we can, push for it externally at the same time. Izzy, would love to hear from you. What are some ways that civic tech teams can advocate for equity and inclusion inside their orgs, even when external systems make that tough?
Absolutely. I've always considered myself very lucky that now more than ever, I'm particularly grateful to be working in a values aligned and values oriented organization. And that means that we care about the work that we're doing, but we also care that the work we do is done well. And I'm hearing that echoed and sort of threaded through so many of my fellow panelists' comments. And that does mean continuing to advocate for equity and inclusion, even when that is under attack currently. And so when we think about what that internal advocacy looks like, it looks like making sure that we do continue to double down on these values, right? Internally, that means we can leverage things like forming communities of support within our organization, so something like an ERG, or even something more informal that can help people understand what is happening, talk about best practices, and then bring forward those recommendations with the full force of a group of experts behind it. I do also think that when an opportunity for input and collaboration is offered within an organization, you should absolutely be taking advantage of it and then using that as a chance to voice your support and your commitment to equity and inclusion, and support the organization's continued commitment to that. Let them know that this is an important value to you, an important reason why you work there, and that it is an important component operating in the civic tech sector, which I also think is really an important component here. I know this question is about, oh, what can you do to advocate within your organization? But I think forming relationships across organizations so that we all advocate together is going to be really essential, not just for equity and inclusion. I think on a lot of different topics we're touching on today, but if Exegy and all of its partners can all make a commitment to diversity and equity and inclusion, then that becomes the sector standard, and it becomes something that is much more difficult to challenge. And we can all share practices about how we are pushing back against those challenges. We can point to each other as examples, and we can resist capitulating to pressures that may be asking us to hide or relax some of those commitments. And so that's why I think forums like this one, as well as building up our professional and social connections and networks, are going to be really important inside and among all of our various organizations.
I mean, we work at the same place, Izzy, but I definitely resonate with some of that. And I hear a lot in our conversation so far that like taking advantage of the time to be more creative and look in new spaces and find ways to connect with other partners is key at this time. Does anyone else have any thoughts on advocating for equity inclusion, either internally or externally?
I am a big fan of the saying, nothing about us without us. I think it really, I mean, a lot of us probably believe in this since we're interested in working in human-centered design and technology. And so I think my advice would be to lean on the folks within your organization who this is, whatever it is impacting them the most, right? So, there's lots of directives that we've seen in the news about how we talk about things. I mean, like Jared was talking about how we talk about accessibility. And I think having a conversation about the best way to approach that with the folks that are the most impacted can really help you make a thoughtful and community-focused decision. And that's not to say that those folks should be obligated to do that in any way, but if they're willing to help you navigate that, I think you're going to come out with a really great outcome in a really hard time.
I love that saying. I haven't heard it in a while, so nice to just kind of restate nothing about us without us. Um, Definitely feeling a lot of sentiment around, the power of community. And I think a lot of times in civic tech, our projects and the ideas of what we want to do are so wide in scope, and cover and impact a lot of communities. I'm curious to hear from some of y'all if more about like projects that you've worked on that have felt maybe smaller in scope, but still made a big difference to the people it served. Jared, I see you intrigued by the question.
Yeah. I've gotten to work on so many like that's something I've gotten to work on a lot of projects that are really important to me. But I think one of the ones that's smaller in scope is one that I did back in, I want to say 2020, I think. And this was together.gov. And this was for the Family Reunification Task Force. So this was a website that we had quickly put together, maybe in the period of about 2 weeks, to help reunite families that were separated by the zero tolerance policy. And I don't know, like I last I heard that, like I think there were like 1 to 2,000 people that use the site to connect with their families. And I don't know, I can't think of like anything more cruel than taking babies away from their parents. And like just if this helped one family, like that would mean so much to me. But yeah, the fact that it helped people, I get teary-eyed just thinking about this project. So
Yeah, I think sometimes we can be so focused on impacting many lives that we don't realize how impactful just one can have a ripple effect. Liz, do you have any examples of project that felt small in scope but still made a big difference?
Yeah, I mean, like, all my government work is much bigger in scope. But I might speak to a government one. I had done some work uh at the city level with the city of St. Paul. And I think there's some city St. Paul folks actually on the call here. Um, and I'll talk about a piece in a project that we were working on. So we were working with the city to sort of shift this like internal department model and redesign the website to be more of a services model. And we started working on this in pre-COVID, and then eventually the redesign happened during COVID. But in pre-COVID times, we would actually we would spend at least a day of the week at the city doing stuff, talking to stakeholders. And they had this like front desk for like permitting and licensing, but that group also handled like all calls into the city, and we would redirect them. And so my like team sat down and shadowed at the desk, both the calls coming in and people coming up to the desk and all the stuff behind. We wanted to get a really good understanding of like the service design that needed to happen at the city. And one of the things that we really felt was the toll that these workers were facing, where like they get a phone call from someone who had a death in their family or someone who hadn't really talked to someone in weeks. And then they would have this call and they'd have to take all that information in and figure out whether or not they could help them or direct them to another city service or not, and then hop on the next call. And when we were, giving all of our recommendations for this chunk of workout, I was very clear, like, hey, you need to support your call center people more. Like they're the front lines, they're taking this all in, and then they have to go take the next thing. And I had someone, recently in the last 6 months at the city reach out and say, like, I won't ever forget when you told us that we need to take care of our people. Right. And so, like, that was just like, a handful of people that work in the service center that were supporting all the constituents that live in the city of St. Paul. But it was such a powerful thing for them to hear. Like, so even those like small things on small projects can make a big impact if they're just said or seen or shared. Those things can have just great impact on people.
Francesca, if I can hop in, Liz, that was an amazing story. But I think, this goes back to my first point around really storytelling and how that can be motivational. And I would just encourage everyone here to take time out of your day to share these bright spots or success stories or whatever it may be with your peers, with your colleagues, with your networks. And on LinkedIn, I think it is so typical for me to get on LinkedIn these days and just be bombarded by the negativity. And I think there is opportunity to share some of these bright spots with a group for motivation. And AI is actually what I was going to bring up in this. If you are like, wow, that seems really difficult to write this all down and put it into words, AI is a great tool to help you out with this. And you can even talk into AI, tell the story exactly like you just did, and it will spit back, a quick blurb that you can share with the people you feel comfortable. Because I do think it is stories like this that will continue to keep this group and people like me motivated.
That was a great addition. Izzy, any other projects that you want to tag in on, that, kind of surprised you, made a bigger impact than maybe initially anticipated?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I think perhaps one example I'll share, and this is from the before times, if you will, but it's something I think about. A lot of the work I do ends up being on very public facing websites. And so there's a lot of sort of pressure, so this has to put his name on it. This has to be trustworthy. This has to be up to a high standard. This is a public face of a government entity, and we need to make sure that that carries with it all of these standards and connotations. And that brings a lot of risk for our clients in particular. They tend to really feel that and carry that risk through projects. And so we were having a conversation with some of our clients who had recently launched a new public facing site that helps with searching and finding affordable housing locally. And they were kind of wavering on how much they're going to publicly talk about it, because they're like, well, it's not done yet. We have more phases, but should we be trying to put it out there because it is soft launched? And how much do we want to talk about it if we're risking like people going to it and then thinking, okay, and what else, right? Like, we really felt a lot of risk with the sort of public exposure of this already publicly available tool. And very quietly, while this conversation was happening, a small local news outlet, I think it was just an email listserv, found the website and published a blurb about it. And the title of the article they wrote was "An Actually Good Public Service." And they were like, this is great. Like, why didn't we have this before? It's so easy to use. And I think about that so much, like, oh, every piece of what we do is an actually good public service. And whether or not we shout that from the rooftops or not, it is still going out there into the world, and it is still helping people. And so I strongly encourage folks to try to keep that in mind. But also, I always try to bring my partners and clients along with me in that. You know, it might not be fully ready yet, but some people are using it and we are building momentum and success. And eventually it will be all of the things that we envision, because it's already of service to people.
I think that's a great reminder that like it doesn't need to be perfect to start inspiring people or get folks excited too. Speaking of, I'm gonna hand it back to you, Liz, because I know you mentioned you were interested to speak up on this one, but how do you keep your team motivated and grounded in purpose during some really challenging times?
Yeah. I think it helps that my team was already grounded in purpose before all this, right? Like being a driven, mission-driven company. You know, we say we want to build a world that works for all. We bring a certain type of people into our company. Now, when everything gets hard, that gets really heavy, right? To keep your motivation on that goal, especially when you feel like you're continuously running into roadblocks or challenges. And so that goes back to like creating space, right? Like creating space for conversations. You know, you might get news every day or every few hours on your project that just kind of like knocks you sideways, right? And so creating a space where people can come and talk through. And so like, you know, very early on with the administration changes, I had, you know, just real honest conversations with my team about, you know, I want you to share things with me when you're feeling uncomfortable. You know, I don't know if I'm going to be able to completely isolate you from this uncomfortable situation, but I want us to have a conversation. You know, there might be things that we can do to like, is it okay if we just get it out of your purview, right? Or do you need to be reassigned? Or do we need to have other conversations on, you know, what's next? And some other things that we did is we put together sort of like as we're having conversations, like, do we have all the context? Do I have all the information? Are we fully informed on what's happening? So sort of slowing down and making sure we have all the information. And then like as things need to get communicated out to the team, like, do we have the right audience that we're communicating to? Is this the right forum? Like, should we do a meeting? Does it need to be a Slack message? Does it need to be something else? Like thinking through how discussions might land with the team or with a client, and then just like constantly thinking about like, are we communicating with openness and care, and reminding ourselves and sort of planning out like, okay, do I have all the information? Is my person safe? Can I help create a safe space for them? What are the options? How do I need to communicate this? And just reminding myself around that. So it really gets back to that, just like really transparent human communication, and then figuring out steps together to just do that. And I think by really showing up for people, that's how you motivate them to be like, no, we're in this together. We're all having different hard times and varying levels of hard times in this, but we're still here and we're here for each other.
Yeah, if I could build off that, I love that so much. I think the question was about like tough project moments. But I think in the space in between those tough project moments too, that's really important. And one of the things that I've been wanting to use the space in between. So for example, in the UX practice area at Coforma, we had one meeting recently where we just played online games together, which is like, oh, you're doing that at work. But I know how hard the folks on the team are working. I know how tough these times are. I'm feeling it too. And community, when the tough moments happen, like Liz said, like to have the support, to have people behind you, that's going to be, you know, the safety net that catches you. That's going to be the backbone that keeps you upright. And so honestly, having time to play those games and to spend time with the people who will be there to support you in ways that aren't just about a project, just about work. I think I definitely felt a different vibe on the team after that, the games meeting that we had, because it just felt like we had gotten to have some fun together, did some problem solving together, which, you know, most people in civic tech, we love that. That's how our brains work. And I think it's going to make us stronger moving forward. I hope it does.
Can I riff on that a little bit too? I love that. Sorry, I had to switch my speakers too. I hope you can still hear me. That made me think about too, like I love the like, can you build in outlets for like stress release or fun, right? Especially if like your day is really heavy, like can we please do that? Like build in some of that. The other thing that I've been thinking about is like, I've been talking to my team about like, do you need to leave early today? Do you need to like go take a walk? Like, do you need to take a day off? Like giving people space to take a break from something too, and encouraging them to do that or really bump up self-care. Like we do a thing on Monday, it's optional, called Mindful Moments, and it's a meditative session for people to pop in on Mondays to kind of set their week. And what we did in January is we started doing those 3 times a week. So we increase those, right? So like finding those opportunities for like team outlets or like ways to like just like fill up your cup more so that you're more resilient, and doing it with like, you know, whether it's as a team or as an individual, whatever an individual needs is just really important. Like how can you increase self-care so that you can build more resiliency to take more on?
Yeah, I'll add too. Like, I mean, everything that Jess and Liz are saying, just 100%. I agree so much with all of that. Like during my one-on-ones for some hard weeks, I mean, I think the last thing that a lot of people want to talk about sometimes is career growth. So, you know, we'll use that time instead, just like, hey, let's just like listen to punk rock, or do you want to just like go off and scream and yell and curse about things in the world? That it feels really good to be able to do that sometimes. And just you know, as a manager too, I mean, it's just yeah, like we're human beings. We're not just like worker drones. So like it's just yeah, let's just have some grace to vent or just do what we need to do to get us back and grounded.
Yeah, I feel like we talk about, you know, in our product and delivery work, being human centered, but it's definitely important to do that from a management person and with yourself and your employees as well. So those are definitely great outtakes. Um, Izzy, I'm curious to kick things off with you on, you know, a similar trend. Um, Obviously, taking care of our teams is important, but taking care of ourselves is too. So, where are you finding hope in this field right now? And are there any, you know, trends or innovations that are inspiring you?
Yeah, that's such a it feels like I have to do a lot more work to find the hope these days because so much of the accessible or maybe push to me messages are really not very hopeful. Um, but a lot of the hope I see is in the storytelling that Devin was referencing earlier. When we get to sit in spaces together and share the good work that is happening. I get a lot of hope from the responses I've seen from the land booking, like sort of like other groups stepping forward. I find that to be really encouraging. And I get a lot of hope and inspiration when I see organizations stand 10 toes down in their values, that they don't capitulate, they remain committed. And that makes me feel far more optimistic in the face of really damaging and upsetting setbacks. And so I am seeking out a lot more spaces like this. Shameless plug, I think the next one will probably be the Code for America Summit, which is here in my neighborhood of DC. If anybody else will be there, I believe I volunteered to share my email address. Let's definitely connect and find ways to share hope together. I think that's the only way we're going to all go through this is together as a group.
That was great. And I feel like the chat has been blowing up in the best kind of way, offering to help share job opportunities, connecting on LinkedIn. So definitely keep that running while we're coming up in the last 5 minutes. Jess, I'd love to hear from you. What advice would you give to someone stepping into this field today or finding themselves in another space where they need to look for other opportunities, especially given, the challenges that we've been talking about?
Yeah, oh my gosh, I have a lot. I think, to continue to the self-care theme, if it is accessible to you, therapy. That'll be my first advice always. But I think, finding ways to take care of your mind. I think that it can be really hard to compartmentalize work. Like one of the things I've talked to with a lot of colleagues is everything that's happening in the news, we're also experiencing a lot of it at work, right? It's like right in front of us all of the time. Some folks on this call have been so deeply impacted by it. And that makes it super hard to find peaceful moments, I think. So there are lots of techniques out there. If you have a therapist, they can help you with this, but finding ways of like helping your brain turn off is really important. So if you're coming into this space, just, have those in your back pocket. In a more active sense, I think staying hyper curious is a survival technique, in a lot of situations. Um, it can help you get past the strong emotion you might have, and better understand the landscape in front of you. It can help you understand again how to meet people where they're at and maybe get them on the bandwagon with you if they aren't already. Just being really open and asking good questions and yeah, using that curiosity, bring that with you. It's going to help you no matter what the situation is in civic tech.
That is definitely good call out and great way of framing, pushing forward in these times. We have 2 minutes left, so I'll ask all of our panelists if they want to go round robin really quick and any last words on, yeah, how we can just remain hopeful and be good advocates during this time. I'm also gonna ask Miguel to please drop in the chat. Um, we don't want to, we want to make this space for community, but also have some action that we can take as well. And Miguel just dropped in the chat a list of some resources, other places you can find community, whether synchronously or async. Code for America is already shouted out, which is coming up in just a couple of weeks. Yeah, does anyone on the panel have any last closing thoughts that they want to share with the group?
I would just say, thank you. This has been great. And it's a bright spot in my day. And I would say like finding community that can, help rally and support you and motivating you is really important during times like these. So whether or not it's here on this call or in the links that was shared, I wrote a playbook for how to create your own digital services meetup group. I have a 300 plus group here in the Twin Cities that I created, and I hacked together my my process for that. But like finding community is how we get through this. So I would really encourage people to continue to come to events like this or host your own or coffees or what have you. That's how we weather this part of life.
Such a great resource and right at the top or bottom of the hour. Thank you everybody for joining today. I hope that, like Liz said, this was a bright spot towards the end of your week. And that you let this be a kickoff point if you haven't yet been leaning into your community. We're still here. We want to be more loud and present. So hopefully you'll be seeing more sessions like these in the near future. And thank you to everyone who dropped their LinkedIn in the chat. Please grab those before you go, drop yours, and we'll be sharing this recording and those resources afterwards.